This is Mike Myer, CEO and founder of Quiq, and I'm here with Kyle McIntyre, one of the smartest people I know. He also heads the AI efforts here at Quiq. And today, I wanted to bring Kyle into the conversation because we wanted to talk about the latest in AI. And so I guess to kick things off, Kyle, there's been a ton of stuff in the news about ChatGPT and how AI is going to take over the world. I'd love to hear your thoughts or your explanation, like what's new now in terms that like a really smart guy like you would help somebody like me understand what's going on.
Absolutely. Yeah, ChatGPT really has taken the world by storm. And on any given day, I kind of go back and forth about, yeah, is it going to take over the world? One thing that's certain for me is it certainly is a paradigm shift. It's going to have a big impact on business. And I think the biggest difference compared to the machine learning and AI capabilities we had prior to ChatGPT and similar LLM technology is that it's really lowered the bar. Before, to build compelling AI often required you to have an in-house data science team, proprietary data assets, train custom models, or fine-tune off-the-shelf models, fairly heavy exercises you had to go through to build compelling AI. So it's not necessarily that ChatGPT just solves new problems that weren't possible to solve before. It's also made problems that were possible to solve before just much easier. And it's kind of transferred AI in some sense out of the hands of deep learning experts in many cases and into application developers. It's created a new application programming model. And I think that's really what's turning things on their head. This is the first time that you've been able to talk to a machine learning model and give it arbitrary instructions, and it does a reasonable job of following them. That is such a more general purpose tool than the AI models that we had in the past.
How much better do you think this generation of AI is at generating and understanding language? Like, is it as good as it was in the past, or is this a big stair-step change from what we've had in the past?
Yeah, I think this is a major increase in the ability of AI to both understand and generate language. So starting in 2017, with the invention of the transformer model architecture, machine learning models were able to read and understand text much better than they had previously. So that was a major step where we were really developing deep understanding of text data, but it still wasn't nearly to the level of what we're seeing now. So what's different about these newer models that like ChatGPT that have started to appear in the last few months? Well, they're similar model architectures, but they've been trained on different data and went through different fine-tuning processes so that they've been able to leverage. In some sense, we had good language understanding before these models, but now we're leveraging them in a much more useful way. OpenAI called this process model alignment. They had a model sitting there, a foundational or a core model that had a lot of deep language understanding, but it hadn't been shown how to like leverage that understanding to be really useful, to be more than just an autocompleter, or to be, something that kind of generates entertaining but sort of random text. And so this new breed of LLMs have been subjected to special data sets, special training techniques to make them really good at following arbitrary instructions and generating human-like content. So in some sense, we maybe had the strong language understanding before in the prior generation of language models, but now we've showed the model how to use that understanding in a much more compelling and useful way.
Interesting. So the GPT, generative AI and transformers, can you help us understand, like, what are those? How does a generative AI algorithm work, and what's a transformer?
Well, I'll give it my best shot here. So generative AI, that term's been around a long time in the machine learning world. So in sort of more traditional ML terms, people used to think of models as falling into one of two categories: a discriminative model or a generative model. A discriminative model is something like a classifier that would say, what is this a picture of? Is it a cat or a dog? It's discriminating between the possibilities, it's selecting. Whereas a generative model, you build a sort of a probabilistic model of understanding on the data you have, but rather than trying to discriminate and say, is this a this or that, a generative model uses its probabilistic understanding to generate new novel content. So that's what a generative model is, and that concept has been around for a while, but it's kind of getting a new identity through ChatGPT and these new breeds of LLMs, because these generative models being able to follow arbitrary instructions and do these hard tasks puts it on a whole new level in terms of what people would now consider generative. So you've kind of got your traditional definition of a generative model, and you've got the new definition from the recent months, where it also sort of implies this ability to really deeply understand what you ask it to do and carry out kind of open-ended tasks. So it's taking on a new meaning. So that's generative AI. And I guess when you think about a language model in generative AI, it literally, when it responds to the instructions that you give it, which are commonly referred to as a prompt, it's literally generating its response for you sort of one token or one word at a time. So it selects one, it looks back and kind of rereads what it has written so far, and then keeps moving forward one token at a time. And that's kind of what makes it generative. You'll also hear terms floating around like autoregressive. That's what we're talking about here, a model that kind of builds its output one token at a time or one word at a time. So transformers, I mentioned that earlier. Those were invented in 2017, and they actually came out of problems with translation systems at the time. So machine translation was working pretty well in 2017, but they're having problems translating longer documents. So the way I would explain it is like this. Imagine somebody told you, sit down and read this entire Wikipedia article, and let's say it's fairly lengthy, and then close that tab and then write a translated version of it in another tab in your web browser. You would remember what you had read, but could you actually give a translation for it? Almost certainly not, unless you had an eidetic memory, because you just kind of have an impression of the whole thing that you read. To actually create a translation of it, what you need to do is sort of progressively look back at the source document and translate it piece by piece. And so the transformer model architecture was essentially going between those two mental models of having to read the whole article and then translate it from memory, versus progressively referencing the source document as you were translating it, which allowed for much better translations over much longer documents. And then the neat thing that happened in 2017 was people realized that, look, this concept of kind of looking back at the source document, we can apply that not just in translation. So now kind of think of a language model where you've fed in your prompt or your instructions and you're generating a completion for it one token at a time. Doesn't it make sense that when you go to generate the next token, you might want to go back and reference instructions very early from the prompt, or tokens you've previously outputted? So this concept of sort of always recontextualizing every word as you generate each word, it needs to be contextualized by the document that preceded it. And actually all the tokens from before, their meaning now might also be influenced by the new token that was written. So that concept is called self-attention, and it's a core concept within a transformer model. So I guess TLDR, transformers allowed for deeper understanding by contextualizing each token by all other tokens in the document over longer documents, because every time you generated a new token, you could potentially go all the way back and look at the beginning to make sure you're doing the right thing. Think about ChatGPT with following instructions, or just when a human takes a test, isn't it necessary sometimes to go back and reread the instructions at the beginning when you're halfway through the answer? Transformers allows a machine learning model to sort of approximate that type of behavior.
That's awesome. Good, good analogy. Good way to explain it. Really good.